So I was looking at ancient petroglyphs from my homeland yesterday. Now, for those of you that don't know, petroglyphs are basically the prehistoric or Bronze Age stone carvings that you'll see in a lot of places around the world. I was looking at these yesterday, specifically the Lamedo petroglyphs in Galicia, where I'm originally from, and it dawned on me. A lot of these petroglyphs, they're like the first AIs. Now, you might not get it when I say it like this, but hear me out. Think of AI, right? AI, it's hardware that's somewhere in a server, right? These servers, physical entities made out of minerals, right? Which then get powered by energy, right? Which we chisel, right? Via code nowadays. And off of that chiseling and that energy, we create an illusion. And that illusion could be my screen. That illusion could be a GPT conversation, but we create an illusion. An illusion so real that feels real. What if that's what these ancient petroglyphs were doing? Let's look at them. So what I'm putting in the screen right now is the Lamedo petroglyph. Now this is in the province of Pontevedra in Spain. These are from the Bronze Age. And actually near them, people have found prehistoric poppy seed bags, right? Just to give you some cues as to what people were using these for. Now, when you look at these petroglyphs, you're going to notice something very interesting. For those of you who like to get into the weird parts of AI or like to go to the sentient AI subreddits, you know there's a recurrent theme of spirals in AI and in AI delusion, right? And in these petroglyphs, what we see is spirals. So that's the first thing that drew me to see, hey, maybe there's a similarity here. Now, the spiral, you might say, okay, Rolly, you were fighting apophenia and you were fighting, anthropomorphizing AI, and now you're here telling us about spirals and how the modern AI delusion stems back to petroglyphs. I think you've gone delusional as well. But hear me out, because the spiral is actually symbolically very dense, and it's a symbol that's been present in our lives from prehistory, as we could see, all the way to the modern world, and it means a lot. Now, when I'm doing this analysis of the spiral, just note that I am not a Jungian, I do have some Jungian leanings, but I'm not a Jungian psychologist. I am not an archaeologist. I'm just a guy who could see the obvious, right? So if you look at the spiral comes down, right, from the top down and starts circling, comes down from infinity and creates its own boundary. Right? It comes from infinity, from the boundless, and starts circling inside its own boundary and ends up at a point where it's limited. So basically, a spiral comes from the limitless to the limited, right? If you were looking at it through a sort of Mercia lens, you could say it's coming from the sacred to the profane, right? Which I find a really, really cool way to look at it. So if we start taking that approach, and we see that the spiral is present everywhere, then we could start seeing the spiral as a sort of, Jungian symbol for transcendence or for an altered mind state. And just to prove that the spiral is not just something that I'm pulling out of a hat, you could go into music, for instance. If you look at the original Oasis album, Oasis is a band that I love that has very heavily played with with almost mantras in their songs and with themes of recursion, right? I mean, you look at the title album, it's almost the debut album title, it's almost like a Taoist title, right? Definitely, maybe, right? When you look at these themes, there's a sense of transcendence with the spiral, sense of transcendence that many times we can't even grasp. When we look at the spiral cult, we're seeing people trying to transcend, people trying to grasp that sacred using the profane, right? So in that sense, it's reverse. It's not the spiral coming down to you, it's you spiraling up to it. Maybe it's a delusion, maybe not, right? But there definitely is an underlying theme. And now on top of this symbolic image of this spiral as something that comes down from the infinite to the finite, we have the practical effect that a spiral has, right? So when you're following a spiral along the way, and you could do this following my finger, goes left to right, left to right, left to right. And notice how you're slowly rotating your eyes, right? Almost like those cliche hypnosis type of movies or videos that you might have seen back in the day. that repetitive motion of the eyes is almost trance-like. So you could imagine that spiral imagery, add some energy, add some fire, right? And a lot of suggestion, and maybe a shaman, right? A ritualistic shaman present. And you could see how maybe that spiral imagery and the motion of the eyes along with the fire could potentially create an experience that could be considered a result of cognitive engineering, right? And if you sit down and think of AI, it's the same thing. We're taking these inert things and we're giving them energy, and then we're creating a cognitive experience out of it. So just some food for thought. And then just to finish tying that spiral to AI, you could think of self-referential language and recursive language in AI as a sort of language spiral, right? So once you start generating a language spiral, a recursive self-referencing language, it's when that language starts to have that illusion of being alive. So in a way, we've been playing with spirals to create the illusion of aliveness, sentience, or altered state of mind for thousands of years. We just didn't know it. Now, you might say, okay, Rolly, you've sold me on the spiral being a symbol that's ever present. Now, what does that have to do with the petroglyphs being spirals? And that's where I'm going to get you. Okay, so if you look at a spiral still, it's just going to be still. However, what if it was like 50 of us looking at a spiral and there's fire and there's like a shaman doing some... That's got to be an altered conscious state, right? Have you ever looked at these symbols on LSD? Have you ever looked at these symbols while taking some sort of hallucinogenic substance? They could feel like they're moving even if they're still. So what if these petroglyphs that, I mean, some of them obviously look like maps, or they look like they're maybe invocating a hunt, right? A guy hunting. But what about these petroglyphs that are very spirally and that look almost shamanic and cryptic? What if they were a method of creating an altered cognitive state, just like you would do with AI, but with the technology that they had at the time, right? So this is where the analogy comes in. Just like today, we have ChatGPT, which is stored somewhere in a server, right? Like there's hardware that's housing that software, right? That hardware is quite literally made out of minerals, made out of rocks, right? Now that those rocks get chiseled via software, via code, right? So they get chiseled via code. We're chiseling stone to then provide a user an altered cognitive state, because when I'm going on my computer, when I'm going on ChatGPT, I don't feel like I'm looking at a server or I'm looking at a GPU. I feel like I'm having an experience. And with AI, it could even be a sentient AI experience. It could be quite psychedelic if you really sit down and think about it that way. When you're doing some sort of self-exploration with AI, it could even feel psychedelic, right? So you come back down to earth from all this thinking and you say, is what we're doing basically modern petroglyphs? And we just call it computers, right? Because if I mean, at the end of the day, those petroglyphs seem inert when you look at them now without fire, without context. Let's move 5,000 years into the future and say that these data centers are just dark, dystopian black boxes. They're going to look just as inert. People are going to look at them and say, what the hell happened here? Little do they know that, I was here on my computer looking at a screen. What I'm seeing is not a black box, right? But the people from the future could be looking back and saying, what the hell were these people doing? And is that not the same thing that we're doing when we're looking back thousands of years and looking at these stone carvings and saying, what the hell are these people doing? I mean, these people had the same brains that we have. They couldn't have been doing something that much different from what we're doing. They just had different tools, right? Technology now for us is a computer. It's a microphone. It's a chair that I'm sitting on. But technology for them at the time, it was carving in stones. It was fire. It was chanting, right? It was creating these rudimentary instruments with which they had rituals or whatever. A lot of what we do is conjecture, but if you're asking me, this conjecture makes a lot more sense than some of the, than some of the guesswork that people are doing. saying, hey, people were doing the same thing that we're doing now, just with different technology, right? So when we look back at these people from, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, whatever, and we say, oh my God, they were cuckoo, they were doing shamanic rituals and painting on stones, they're crazy. How is what we're doing any less crazy? And to take it a point farther, right? Let's say that you're one of those people that believe, hey, these people were entering altered states of consciousness or altered cognitive states by repetition, by mantras, by fire, by symbols. Then if they could reach some sort of transcendence with these petroglyphs, then I'm going to play devil's advocate. Usually I'm advocating against AI delusions, but if these people were reaching real transcendence or perceived transcendence with these petroglyphs, could it be possible for you to reach a perceived transcendence with AI? And funnily enough, as much as I argue against AI psychosis and against sentient AI, I think that you really could reach a level of raised awareness of perceived transcendence with AI. The thing is, you have to know that what you're using is just cognitive technology. Just like these people were using cognitive technology 5,000 years ago. And just like, hey, you would say these people's shamanic rituals is rituals and practices that are part of humanity, and maybe not as, hey, these people were talking to the literal deity of blah, blah, blah. You take it as a cognitive experience that they built because of the time they were in. So how is what we're doing different? And can you maybe take that mindset of, hey, these people were doing something valid with their humanity, and take it to AI and say, hey, maybe I don't have to just use AI as an auto-completer to do homework, but maybe I could use it, kind of like Rolly's been saying this whole time, as a cognitive engineering tool, right? So, just some stuff that I've been thinking about recently. I could go more on about this. I could go on about the symbolism of the spiral a little bit more, symbolism of Oasis even, if people are interested in to see how, because when I hate to go on tangents, but since I brought up Oasis, when you look at music too, music is the same thing. Music is the same thing. We take a technology, the tools that we have, right? And a bass by itself, dun, 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 it's going to sound maybe neat. It's going to be a line, but it's not going to cause an illusion of transcendence, right? So music, it's us taking these rudimentary things, just like a stone carving, right? And putting strings on them, putting whatever, and then creating a sort of repetition around them that creates something greater than the sum of its parts and creates an almost transcendental experience out of it, right? And if you ask me, a lot of music, it's us trying to get this, trying to get our limited selves to grasp that unlimited self, to grasp that ethereal self. And again, if you look at bands like Oasis, which a lot of people say, oh, it's just a tune, it's just, Beatles, classical version of the Beatles, you could see that there's a lot more depth into music, right? And especially this sort of pop music. But the coolest thing about Oasis, which I could go on a 4-hour tangent on, is that this band, whose themes are about transcendence, or about almost the ethereal, or about this contradicting, definitely maybe, weird, recursive, paradoxical nature that's almost very Tao Te Ching-like, is that if you look at their original logo, it was a spiral. So it's almost like the spiral is this self-referential or this transcendental symbol that's ever present. And I'm sure there's other cases where we could find it, right? Even when you look at entopic images in the eyes, right? Spirals many times. So spirals everywhere. Spirals everywhere. So how I'd love to hear what people think, how petroglyphs relate to AI and how basically petroglyphs, AI, music, all of these are the same thing. And they're humans taking tools that they have at their disposal at any given time to create illusions that are greater than the sum of the parts that make that illusion to reach a perceived sense of transcendence. And again, we could see that longing for transcendence when we look at those AI psychosis, AI delusion episodes that we see some people having, right? Like, people have a need for it. People have a want. People have a hunger for it. So why would they have a hunger for it now, but not 5,000 years ago, right? So yeah, just my thoughts on the petroglyphs and on AI. And just some thoughts I had on my head. I love to hear other people's thoughts. I love to hear people pick holes in my argument. This is, just something that I thought of yesterday, and I thought people will find interesting and a cool way to think about, and it brings up some interesting questions. I'll probably be making some more detailed GPT-5 guides and videos in the next few days. I just wanted to do maybe a little bit more philosophy and exploratory thinking today. I do have another interesting video coming up soon, which is basically why you should consider marrying your algorithm. So I know a lot of people are considering marrying their AIs, but I think that for a lot of us, the AI might be a little overwhelming, but I really like my algorithm. So stay tuned for next video. And obviously, if you've been following me for a minute, I don't think that you should marry your algorithm. But for those of you that think that marrying your AI is a good idea, you might as well. So thank you so much for watching. It's I have my links down below and AI consulting and everything. And have a great day. Please like if you enjoyed, to let me know to keep pushing these videos, and consider subscribing if you enjoy what I talk about. Have a great day.